Have you noticed that Bitcoin has been struggling ever since Uranus entered Gemini on April 25th, 2026? Most astrologers and crypto enthusiasts expected Uranus in Gemini to be wildly bullish for Bitcoin. After all, Uranus rules technology, disruption, innovation, and digital networks. Gemini rules communication, information, and data exchange. On the surface, it seems like the perfect combination for cryptocurrencies. But what if the market is telling us something completely different? Since Uranus entered Gemini on April 25th, Bitcoin has fallen nearly 15%. More importantly, after peaking around May 10th, Bitcoin has dropped over 20%. That's not exactly the explosive start many crypto bulls were expecting. In today's video, I want to share why I'm becoming increasingly cautious on Bitcoin between now and October, and why I believe this period could bring significantly lower prices before a potential recovery later in the year. Let's start with Uranus. One of the biggest mistakes investors make is assuming that a planetary transit automatically means prices go up. Uranus doesn't necessarily mean higher prices. Uranus means disruption. It means surprises. It means volatility. Historically, major planetary ingresses often create turning points rather than immediate continuation of existing trends. Sometimes the market moves in the exact opposite direction of what everyone expects, and that may be exactly what we're seeing now. While many expected Uranus and Gemini to launch the next great crypto bull market, Bitcoin instead appears to have formed a significant top shortly after the ingress. The second factor I'm watching is Saturn and Neptune moving together in Aries. This is one of the most important astrological signatures of 2026. Saturn represents reality, accountability, and limitations. Neptune represents dreams, speculation, narratives, and sometimes illusion. When Saturn and Neptune combine, markets are often forced to separate fantasy from reality. Speculative assets frequently come under pressure during these periods because investors begin asking difficult questions. What is this really worth? What assumptions are being priced in? Are expectations too optimistic? Cryptocurrencies are one of the most speculative asset classes in the world, making them particularly sensitive to this type of energy. The third factor is market psychology. Bitcoin has developed a reputation for following a 4-year cycle associated with its halving events. Historically, major rallies have often been followed by significant corrections. Now, I'm not saying history must repeat itself exactly, but when we combine historical market cycles with challenging astrological conditions, it creates a setup worth paying attention to. What really caught my attention is that Bitcoin is already showing weakness. This isn't a prediction of something that might happen someday. The decline has already begun. The question is whether this is simply a correction or the early stages of a much larger move lower. If Bitcoin continues making lower highs and lower lows throughout the summer, that would strengthen the bearish case significantly. Another factor to consider is money rotation. Jupiter is preparing to enter Leo on June 30th, a sign associated with entertainment, travel, leisure, luxury, creativity, and consumer spending. Rather than flowing into speculative digital assets, some investment capital may rotate into traditional stocks and sectors connected to these themes. In other words, we could see stocks perform relatively well while Bitcoin struggles. That wouldn't be unusual. Markets frequently rotate leadership from one asset class to another. Now let's talk about timing. The period from June through October contains several astrological pressure points involving Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Mercury cycles. Taken together, these suggest increased volatility, heightened uncertainty, and a greater risk of sharp market swings. However, and this is important, I do not necessarily view this as the end of Bitcoin's long-term story. In fact, if a significant decline occurs during the summer and early fall, it could actually lay the groundwork for the next major advance. Markets often need to shake out excessive optimism before a healthier rally can begin. From an astrological perspective, the period after October looks increasingly interesting. By then, much of the fear and pessimism associated with a correction may already be priced in. Sentiment could become extremely negative, just as longer-term Uranus and Gemini themes begin to reassert themselves. Remember, Uranus in Gemini is ultimately about technological evolution, digital networks, innovation, and new ways of exchanging information. Those themes don't disappear simply because a correction takes place. My current expectation is that if Bitcoin experiences a substantial decline between June and October, a reversal could begin to develop late in the fourth quarter, potentially setting up a stronger finish to the year than many investors currently expect. In other words, I am not bearish on Bitcoin forever. I am cautious on Bitcoin for the next several months. Those are two very different outlooks. The scenario I'm watching most closely is a summer to early fall correction, followed by a late year recovery phase as market conditions stabilize and investors begin looking ahead to 2027. For me, the key level isn't astrology, it's price. If Bitcoin continues breaking support levels, failing at resistance, and maintaining its pattern of lower highs and lower lows, the chart will begin confirming what the astrology is already suggesting. Then, later in the year, I'll be looking for signs of exhaustion in the selling pressure, improving market structure, and evidence that a new accumulation phase is beginning. As always, this is not financial advice. It is simply my interpretation of current astrological and market conditions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Bitcoin has already seen its high for this cycle? Or do you believe a new all-time high is still ahead? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy combining astrology, market cycles, and investing, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future forecasts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.